Now we're going to talk more about how do we care for our leaders, the people in positions of authority and influence. But this is also, as you're probably noticing by now, if you've stuck with us for this long, you've noticed all of these truths are important for each one of us. So caring for the body means we're caring for each part, and caring for each part means we're caring for the body. So all of the pieces go together. We're going to talk about rest. So let's begin in Exodus chapter 34. You thought I was going to start in Genesis, but I didn't. We all know about the day of the Sabbath, and that's important. But this is where this gets codified into the law. So Exodus 34, starting in verse 21. 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. You shall observe the Feast of Weeks, the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in the year shall all your males appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. So often the most difficult part of both prevention and healing is the most important. And it's rest. I cannot overstate the importance of appropriate rest, especially when we want to accomplish something important. This is true physically, this is true spiritually, this is true emotionally. When we want to accomplish something, when we want to work, we want to achieve, we can absolutely work, even powerfully, for a short time. And then we have to stop. And we know from reading Genesis that God did the same thing. He worked for 6 days, and then it specifically says that he rested from all of his work. He stopped working on the seventh day, and that becomes our model that we just read here in Exodus 34. That's the model that then was codified in the law. You should do your work 6 days out of the week, and then on the seventh you shall rest. But then if you notice, there's some other things there too. 3 weeks of feasting, 3 weeks that were set aside in the year when something other than work was supposed to be done. So the Old Testament model was 1 day a week, 3 weeks out of a year, 1 year in every 7, and then there's another special year every 50 years. Okay? So if you add that all up, that's a lot of downtime. But if we think about our normal, natural human rhythms, we sleep, on average, 1/3 of our life. It's actually more than that because at the beginning and the end, we tend to sleep more than 8 hours. But we sleep for about 1/3 of our life. So that's 1/3 where there's no productivity at all. And if we start sacrificing that sleep time, suddenly our productivity starts to decline as well. So it's very important that we recognize the rhythms of rest that God has built into the world. He's built into our physical being. He's built into his demonstration of the creation of the universe. It's very important to recognize that rest is not a waste. It's not something that I wish I could get through so that I can do something important. Because God commanded us to rest. He actually put it in the law. It's a rule. And if you don't follow the rules, you get in trouble. Okay? Now, we are, of course, under no obligation to follow the Old Testament law as it was written. However, the principles that are being modeled are very important for us to understand. So even in planting season or in harvest, the Jews were required to observe the Sabbath. So this demonstrates that there are things that are more important than the work that God has called us to do. Okay? There are things that are more important than the work that God has called us to do. And if you can imagine, I'm trying to plant my crops. This isn't just for fun. I'm not planting flowers in my garden. I'm planting this so that I have something to eat in the future. And God says, even on planting day, you need to rest if that happens to be the Sabbath. Stop your work. The same thing is true of harvest time. I'm gathering in the crops. If I don't get this in now, the weather's going to change. It's going to harm it. The bugs are going to eat it. Something. I'm going to lose out on this. Again, this is my food. This is what keeps me alive. And God says, even if your harvest is falling on a Sabbath day, you take your Sabbath. Because it turns out God knows that we need to eat. He knows our needs before we can ask him. He already has stored up enough. He says in the year of Sabbath, when you're not allowed to plant, that he gives us more in the previous 2 years, more so that we can store up and be ready for it. Because he already knows it's coming. He's already built it into the system. So it's important that we follow the principles, that we understand the importance that God places on rest. If we look in 1 Chronicles 24, there's an explication of the temple service and how all the different Levites would be chosen for their service. And it turned out that about 2 weeks out of the year, a group of priests would be responsible for the temple service. Just 2 weeks. That's it. Right? And the rest of the time, they were receiving the blessings of being a Levite. And they had to serve only for 2 weeks. Now, sign me up for that job. I'd love to have a job that I only have to work 2 weeks, right? But that's not the point. Okay? And then daily, lots were cast. They were asking God who is to be the minister at any given time. So the point here, why do we care about this? When we're serving, when we're ministering, we might be already identified, hey, you're the one who's supposed to be ministering. Maybe I'm a Levite, maybe I'm a priest. I have been chosen by God for this thing. And then we still go back and ask God, today, am I supposed to do this? Today, am I supposed to be the one in charge of this? This week, am I supposed to be taking care of all of these things this week? And it shows us again a principle, a practice of submitting our ideas to God, even the ones that he gave us. We submit our ministry to God. We submit our service to God. And what happens when we submit ourselves to God? One thing we know is we have the strength then to resist the devil, right? We can resist the enemy when we're submitting to God. So we see again this Old Testament pattern that is showing us a principle of how we're supposed to engage when we're working, when we're serving. So in the ministry, we have times of activity, we have times of rest. And even inside of our times of activity, we're still asking God, is this actually what I'm supposed to do? I'm submitting myself to God. So in the concept of rest and recovery, one thing, mentioned it already, sleep. We sleep about a third of our lives. You know, sleep is incredibly necessary for life. If you don't sleep for long enough, do you know what happens? You go crazy and then you die. That's it. The record is about 11 days. And after that, your body just fails. So we are designed to require sleep for our health. We are designed to require time that is separate, that is away from all other activity. And sleep, we used to think, well, sleep is a very passive thing and you just sleep. It turns out that's not true at all. your body is doing all kinds of things when you're asleep, most of which are repairing. This is a time specifically when your brain rejuvenates. There are specific cleansing, purifying, and healing processes that only happen when you are asleep. They only happen when you're asleep. And if we don't sleep, then we don't get the repair, we don't get the rejuvenation, we don't get the healing and the restoration that we need. So sleep is not the only way that we rest, but sleep is a huge, important part. And often, we act like toddlers who, I don't want to go to sleep because I'm afraid I'm going to miss out. Right? And we wrestle with our children and say, no, you need to sleep because you're going to be happier, you're going to be healthier, I'm going to be happier, everyone's going to be happier. Could you please just get your nap, right? And we have to fight with our children because they recognize, wait a minute, the world is still going on while I'm asleep and I'm missing out. Some of us never grow past that. We never grow past that concept that, wow, I could be doing something more. I could be doing something better. I could be accomplishing. I could be engaging with the world, but I have to sleep instead. And it's not right. It's not good. It's not fair. I want to be a part of the world. I want to do these things. But it turns out, without sleep, we cannot healthfully and appropriately engage with the world. We can't actually do those things that we need. And so God built us to need sleep. And sleep really helps us to be the best that we can be. I heard it said that you can train yourself to function on less sleep. That is absolutely possible. But what you cannot do is train yourself to require less sleep. So that's the old robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? We're stealing from our health in order to be more functional in a particular space at a particular time. And we all know there are times in our lives when we just can't sleep as much as we could or should or would hope that we could. Right? There are times in life when that's just not available. But the problem is when that becomes our lifestyle, when that becomes our default setting, is like, no, I'm not going to protect my sleep because I look at it as a burden. I'm not going to protect and pursue healthy sleep because I look at that as something to be avoided. Well, then we're not as healthy as we can be. And this is not just physically. This is spiritually, emotionally, mentally as well. We're not able to engage with the world. We're not able to do the things that God wants us to do. Often we're not even able to hear from God appropriately if we're not able to sleep and to rest well. So think about rest after exercise. That's another perfect example. It's not sleep necessarily, but rest after exercise. And if you're, trying to get big and strong like me, or an actual strong person, you engage with something that is actually harmful to your body. It's more than what it would like to do, and you create a little bit of disruption, and then what do? Stop that. Okay? Stop hurting yourself. Why? So that in the rest time, your body can recover. And not only does it recover, but it repairs and it builds itself stronger than if you hadn't come up against the challenge. So think about this in a spiritual sense. We come up against a challenge, and maybe in that challenge, we're overwhelmed a little bit. Then what do we need to do? We need a time of rest to recuperate, to repair, to recover, so that we can grow stronger, so that when we go against the next challenge, we can go up against a bigger challenge, or we can just blow through those little ones that we've already done. Right? That's the way that God designed our physical bodies. He designed our mental bodies, our spirit bodies the same way. Okay? We are designed to recuperate, recover, rejuvenate in a time of rest. And God designed the world that way. And so when he says in his word, 1 day a week, you have to rest. This is in addition to sleep. Like we're already sleeping. Now, 1 day a week, rest. So what's rest? It's withdrawing from the challenge. If we think about it with exercise, I'm challenging myself with exercise, and then I withdraw from that challenge in order to rest and recuperate. So withdrawing from the challenge means withdrawing from ministry. That's a tough one for a lot of our leaders and ministers and workers and fixers and servers to hear. But I want to serve God. I want to do what's best. One of my favorite things, my favorite passage in all of Scripture is the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? And if you read the end of Luke chapter 4 and you go right into, Matthew chapter 4 and you go right into Matthew chapter 5, don't stop at the chapter break. You see at the end of Matthew 4, they were bringing all of the people from all around the region for Jesus to minister to. And he was healing them. He was putting his hands on them. He was healing them, healing the sick and casting out demons and doing all these things. And the word got out, hey, there's a man of God here. Miracles are happening. Get over there. You're going to get help. Okay? And then right after that it says, and Jesus, seeing the crowds, went up on a mountain. Right? He left the ministry. Did you know that Jesus left the ministry? He left the ministry. Matthew chapter 5. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain and he gathered his disciples and he taught them. So he withdrew from the challenge and instead was training for the next group to be able to do the things that he was doing. Okay, and I could preach a whole sermon on that. I won't do that right now. We'll save that for another session. But that's so important to recognize that when there's all of this ministry to do, there's all of this need, Jesus withdrew. And you see this after he feeds the 5,000. He's been walking with these people and teaching them and finally recognizes they have a problem. We're going to have to fix it, guys. Come on, guys, what do you got? What do you got? Show me your lunch. What do you got? And then we know that miracle where he feeds the 5,000 men plus women and children. And then after that, what does he do? He goes up on a mountain by himself. He sends the disciples to fight the storm across the sea. But after he ministers, he takes time away with the Father. He withdraws from the challenge. And that's a very, very important thing to recognize. And again, if we look at the Old Testament model, 1 day a week, 3 weeks out of the year, and 1 year every 7. That's astounding. That's astounding. Most of us can't even wrap our minds around that. Like, you're telling me I only get to work for 6 years and then I have to stop? Like, that doesn't make any sense. What am I supposed to do? Don't you know the fields are white unto harvest? Well, remember, in plowing time and also in harvest time, you are required to take the Sabbath. So God prioritizes the rest and recovery and recuperation over the actual work of the ministry. Why? Because the rest and recuperation and recovery allows us to be stronger so that we're more efficient when we go back into the fray. So it's important that we emphasize the importance of rest. Imagine, if you will, that there's an injury in the body. You sprain your ankle, twist your knee, something, you got an owie, okay? What does your body ask you to do? Stop putting force through that part of the body, right? And it usually does that by saying, ow, right? We have pain. We have pain that prevents us from putting more stress into that injured area. I mean, you get a cut, you bump the table, you get a little bruise, whatever. We all experience, our body tells us, stop doing that thing. And sometimes that's stop getting out of bed, right? It can be to that level. But our body is telling you, wait, no, you have to withdraw from the stress. You have to withdraw from the challenge so that I can work here behind the scenes and get you healed up, and then we can move forward. That's normal, that's natural, that's how God built us. He built us so that when there's a problem, the very first thing that we are naturally going to do is stop engaging in the thing that caused the problem. Withdraw from the challenge. Withdraw from the stress. It's no different when we're talking about emotional, mental, spiritual, any other injury or wound. We have to withdraw from the stress. We have to be protected from that thing that's causing the injury. And we actually have to be under the threshold of injury. Okay? So I give this example a lot to my osteopathic students. If you were to hold a stack of papers, okay, and you keep getting loaded with more and more and more and more and more, and finally you reach your limit, and your body will just naturally shut down. Okay, so if I'm holding something heavy in my hand and we get past my strength, my arm's ability to hold that up, my whole arm is just going to collapse, and I'm going to drop the weight. Okay? Now let's say that was 500 pounds, because I'm a strong guy. I can lift 500 pounds, right? So at 499, I'm fine. And then at 500, boom, I drop. Okay? If I were to immediately go back and try to lift that thing again, my body would not allow me to lift 450 pounds. It would be a big difference below where the injury happened. Okay? It wouldn't let me get to 499. Wait a minute, you were strong at 499. How come you can't do 499 pounds anymore? Because that's really where your strength was, and you failed at 500. Well, now my body's going to fail at 450. Why? Because it has a built-in protection that says, wait a minute, we have to withdraw from the stress until we can heal up, we can recover, we can be restored and strengthened. And then eventually, sometime in the future, I will be able to, well, now I can do 505, right? Because I went to failure and my body had to recuperate and recover. But if I go immediately back to it, my body will say, no, I can't get anywhere near where that threshold of injury was. Okay? Now let's think about that in the context of ministry. If you come to a place in ministry where you are overwhelmed, okay? And let's say you can handle 499 units of ministry. Okay? Just for example. And you get that 500th unit, well, that's too much. What happens? Your system shuts down. But we say, okay, well, I'm sorry I overwhelmed you. That's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. All we have to do is take off that one straw, right? We only have to take away 1 unit of ministry in order for you to be back under your threshold of injury. And that's not how we work. I have to take off more things, and then I can come back and say, okay, well, maybe I'm operating at 450 now, or 420, or 415, or whatever. I can operate at that level while I'm recuperating, recovering, but I have to withdraw from the stress. So if I withdraw from all of the stress for a time, I can heal and recover and recuperate, and then I can come back, and then we can start again under that threshold and slowly ramp our way up. But this is natural. This is how God built us. And we ignore this often because we have this industrial model of I want to produce widgets, and the more I produce, the more I'm doing, the better I am. And we forget that we're living systems that are created in God's image, and He has built into our very being the way that He expects us to work. So when we're trying to care for our leaders, when we're trying to care for the people who are in ministry, when we're trying to care for ourselves, we have to recognize if we ever cross that threshold of overwhelm, we don't get to just step right back over that. That's not how it works. We have to be offloaded. So how do we do that? Well, you have to have a team around you, or else everything's just going to drop. Right? If we don't have that interconnected family of families concept, well, what's going to happen when we take one person out in order to recuperate and recover? Everything's going to fall. And often we have built these structures in our churches, well-meaning, where in a certain ministry or a certain gathering or a certain mission, we've put one person out there and by themselves responsible for everything, and then we wonder why they fail. Because God has already showed us You can't do it by yourself. He's already showed us you have to have times of rest and recuperation. He's already showed us that if you ever get overwhelmed, for whatever that reason is, you have to come back below that threshold of overwhelm, below that threshold of injury, far below it, and then work your way back up. That's normal. That's how God designed the system. Now, here's another thing. We were talking in our previous session about prevention. How do we prevent these injuries? How do we prevent overwhelm? Well, one thing is rest. Just like how do we prevent injury if I'm trying to exercise, right? If I'm exercising, I'm trying to actually stress myself to my failure point. That's what I'm actually trying to do. But if I don't want to actually injure myself, I want to stress, but I don't want to injure, I have to protect the rest and recuperation time. It is just as important as my training time. And a lot of the elite trainers that are training elite athletes will actually put more emphasis on the structure of your rest program than they will on your training program. Because rest is actually where the body gets stronger. Rest is where we build the tissue that creates the strength, that creates the ability for us to do the things that we want to do. Why do we not do that in the world of ministry? If I want longevity, if I want resilience, if I want strength, we should follow the same model. Where yes, there's training. Yes, there's times of stress. Yes, there's times of engagement. But more important are the times of rest and rejuvenation and recovery. They're more important. And what does that look like? What does rest look like? At the very base level, the very least thing that rest can be is withdrawing from the stressor. Withdrawing from the stressor. How many times in ministry or in any part of our life do we say, yes, I'm resting, but actually I'm constantly thinking, I'm thinking, right? And my mind is still stressed. My mind has not been withdrawn from the stressor. I'm still doing the work in my mind if I'm not doing it with my body. Guess what that's not? That's not rest. It's not rest because I need to withdraw from the stressor in order to rest. And if the stressor is mental, I have to be able to withdraw my mental energy from that stressor. If the stressor is spiritual, I have to be able to withdraw my spirit from that stressor. So we have to build into our concept of ministry, we have to build in protected place, protected time, and we have to say, you know what? This is not allowed. We cannot do anything else. We have to rest. Nothing else is allowed. We have to rest. There's a time to minister. There's a time to work. But there's also a time to rest and recuperate. And both are important. And it's very easy to say, but when I know that I'm working, when I know that I'm ministering, when I know that I'm engaging, I can measure that outcome right now. I can say this person was hurting and now they're not hurting. This person was hungry and now they're fed. This sermon was unpreached, now it's preached. Okay? I can measure easily the quote-unquote benefit of doing the work. But it's much more subtle and it's much more difficult to measure the benefit of rest and recuperation because of the way we measure. If I'm measuring over time, if I'm looking, well, maybe not in this moment, but over 6 months, over a year, how are you doing? Maybe I can get a little better understanding of the importance of rest. But there's something else too that's not just the quantity of ministry, but the quality. And I'm going to do a little kind of medical metaphor and I'll bring it back, okay? So there's a way to train our bodies that stresses our bodies, okay? If you want to go and run a marathon, God bless you. I'll bring you water at the finish. You want to go run a marathon, you can do that in a way that is stressing your body. But you know that you can also train to do that in a way that does not stress your body. You start out at a slower pace with less stress on your body, and you teach and train your body, hey, this thing that I'm doing, it's not stressful. You don't have to worry, you don't have to freak out, it's okay. And then you slowly increase the speed or whatever the stressor is, but each time you're training yourself, this is not stressful, this is not stressful, this is not stressful, this is not stressful. And you get to a place where you can run that marathon and not have any stress on your body. Now, we've all heard the stories of marathon runners who drop dead of a heart attack. And you're like, oh my gosh, like if they're not healthy, who in the world is? Well, the issue is a lot of times those athletes are actually performing their service in a way that is stressful for them. It's not supporting them. It's not actually healing their body. It's only ever stressing. And so the body responds the best way it can. It throws up scar tissue and all those sorts of things. And then eventually we have a heart attack and you're like, why did this marathoner die of a heart attack? That's supposed to be so healthy. Well, the problem was they were training in a way that was stressful. And so we can see, like, if we're training in a way that's not stressful versus training in a way that is stressful, we can see over time the difference that makes on the body. Okay? But it's not something that you see the first day. The first day you try to train without stressing your body. I'm so slow. I've never run this slow. It's taken me so long to go this distance. This is terrible. My other way is better. Right? That same thing is true when we start emphasizing the importance of rest, whether we're trying to make money in a Fortune 500 company or we're trying to serve in the local church. The first time when we try to emphasize rest, we're going to say, well, look at all the things that I'm missing out on. Look at how much slower this is going. Look at all of the opportunities that I'm letting go by. I'm missing out. I'm not doing as well as I could. But over time, you're going to find that you're able to do so much more in a smaller amount of time with less stress on your system because we're following God's design of resting and recuperating. So what's some practical support? Because this is a beautiful sermon to preach. Oh, we should just all rest. We should just all stop ministry. Okay? And most of us are going to say, yeah, that sounds good. Most of the people in leadership, in positions of influence, are going to say, yes, that's great. I agree with that. That's a word from the Lord. I believe that. I read it in the Bible. I know that's true. But I've got all this work to do. But I'm so busy. But there's no one here to help me. Okay? So what are some practical things we can do? First of all, I've got to ask a question. If a leader takes a break, who does the work? If a leader takes a break, who does the work? You know, it might be that the answer is no one. It just has to wait. When the entire nation of Israel took their Sabbath all together, who did the planting? Who did the harvesting? No one. It just didn't get done. Okay? And this is something we have to learn. Sometimes that's a beautiful, wonderful, okay, beautiful thing to do. Nothing. Never underestimate the importance of doing nothing. There's a time and a place to do nothing. And when God called us into those spaces, He knows the work that needs to be done. He knows what actually has to be accomplished, and He also knows when it needs to be accomplished. It's not on your calendar. It's not on my calendar. It's on His. He knows the timeline. And so when He says it's time to rest and there's no one else to do the work, guess what that means? That work didn't need to be done today. It actually, factually did not need to be done today because the God of the universe said, this doesn't need to be done today. That is amazingly relieving. I can just blame God for all the work I don't do. It's His fault. He told me not to work, right? But that's actually true when we apply that appropriately. When there are some things that if a leader or worker is not able to work, it's just not going to get done. And that's okay if we connect our expectations to God's direction instead of the expectations to my own understanding. I know I've got this many days to do the work. I know that I've got this much work to do. I know how much work I have to do each day to get it done. And God says, not today. You just threw my whole calculation off. Cool. How are you doing with me? Right? And so we have to encourage our leaders, hey, there's times when, you know what, you shouldn't be doing anything. You should not be ministering. And I'm not coming here to ask you to help me. I'm coming here to help you. Can you stop? Could you just stop? Could you just take a minute? Let's rest, because God called us to do that. But there are some things that still have to be done. Right? Jesus talks about this to the Pharisees, when a child was to be circumcised on the 8th day, and that happened to be a Sabbath, the priest still worked on the Sabbath. They profaned the Sabbath. No, they're doing something that God called them to do. There are some things that God says, you know what, we're still going to do these. That's okay. The problem is we decide often, as people in positions of authority, positions of influence, positions of ministry, well, listen, I'm serving God, so therefore it's more important. I don't have to listen to what God says. It's so important for me to do this work, I'm not going to listen to God. Now, of course, we'd never say that out loud, but often in our actions, that's exactly what we do. And there are some things that God says, you're right, you have to do this. Even though it's the Sabbath day, you still have to do this. But much, 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 much more often, he's going to say, you need to not do this, because it's the time for rest. Okay? So some things can't wait, and that's true. And so what we need is a team approach that allows a system that supports both the leaders and the members. Right? We go back to that family of family thing, the concept of the body supporting itself. Do we have a structure that says, you know what? There's going to be times when this part of the body absolutely has to rest. What is the rest of the body going to do? Does the rest of the body shut down? Maybe. Or does the rest of the body say, hey, we're going to take up the slack. We're going to do this thing because we need this part to rest and recuperate and recover and get better and get stronger. So we're going to create an environment where this body part is protected for a time, and we're going to offload some of the tension, right? So maybe what we need is to have some designated emergency call schedule so that the members know who to call when a leader is on a Sabbath, right? Well, I always call Pastor Bob because he's the one that nobody knows my problems like Pastor Bob. Well, if Pastor Bob is on a Sabbath or taking a week, or maybe he's in a Jubilee, the people need to know, well, we don't call Pastor Bob. We call Pastor Greg instead, or whatever, right? We know on purpose beforehand, we have a system in place. This is what we're going to do so that we protect Pastor Bob. Because you know what? If you call Pastor Bob, you know what he's going to do? Probably he's going to come and help you. Right? So I don't want to be part of the reason that Pastor Bob doesn't follow God and is not being obedient when God says to rest. So I'm going to make sure I'm not going to call Pastor Bob, and I'm not going to let you call Pastor Bob either. Right? We're going to have a system in place where everybody knows, hey, for this period of time, we're going to shift our normal schedule. We're going to shift it just a little bit so that we can protect our leaders who need that time, need that space, need that opportunity to rest and recuperate. Okay? But also we can have a system in place where we have our emergency backup schedule, right? Where we already know, hey, we know the things that are going to have to get done. We know who is normally in charge. But what happens if something comes up unexpectedly? Well, we know next year Pastor Bob is going to be resting, or we know that in March Pastor Bob is going to be in Colorado at the Uplift 2026 with Arcadia Ministries, right? Who's going to take care of the flock in that time? Well, we can plan for that ahead and say, okay, well, this time Pastor Bob gets to get blessed by going to Arcadia, and next year Pastor Bob's going to be staying at home, and Pastor Greg's going to go, and he's going to be blessed by Arcadia. Okay, we can plan for those things in the future. But what happens if there's an emergency situation? What if there's a wounding, a hurt, an attack, something that comes up? This is just practical stuff. Like practically speaking, we say, okay, well, normally I'm in charge of this, but I know that if something happens to me, then I alert the next guy and he's going to take care of whatever. Right? So just having a practical thought in our head, well, I'm going to assume that my leader, whatever ministry I'm involved in, my leader is going to need to rest. Okay? I'm just going to plan for that. And so some of the things aren't going to get done exactly at the same time as if, we had an endless supply of energy and no one ever had to rest. Okay, great. We got that figured out. Then we're going to plan and say there are specific times where we know that our leader is going to be in a resting state and isn't going to be able to do that job. So we're going to redistribute our authority structure for those times on purpose. So we know, well, this you're going to go to Pastor Greg for, and he's going to tell you, well, really, just wait until Pastor Bob comes back, right? Or some other thing, he's like, no, Pastor Bob's not here. I'm going to take care of this. Let's do it right now, okay? And we can do that beforehand, but also we can build into our culture, into our mindset, into our understanding, well, if something happens and there's an emergency and, Pastor Bob has to leave the country, he has to come off the mission field, or he has to go back to be with his family, or whatever the issue is. Well, we don't just fall apart, because we already beforehand have decided this is how we distribute things if these particular issues come up. If these particular people are taken out, we already have a backup plan. Do you know your physical body? It already has 12 trillion backup plans. It already knows what to do. If suddenly you were to sprain your ankle, do you know your entire body will shift? Every single cell in your body will shift to offload that ankle. We call that limping. But your entire body actually has to shift in order to take the stress off of the wounded part. And it does it that fast because God's designed it that way. So why don't we design our systems after His image? He designed us after His image. We should return the favor, right? We should say, hey, you know what you're doing. So before there is an emergency, before there's a crisis, before there's a problem, we should already have in place, what are we going to do if this person is taken out and they need rest, recovery, recuperation? Because we've already done it for all of the situations that we can think of, but then we also need to have another foundation underneath that says, well, what if there's something we don't know what to do? Okay? And remember, this is not stuff that we're dreaming up. We're not sitting and plotting and planning. We're saying, Father God, we want to hear from you. We want to submit our entire ministry to you. We want to follow your design of rest and recuperation. Guide us into making our system so that we can care for each other well. Right? I'm not telling you to think this stuff up or go look at the most successful corporation you can find and follow their model. I'm saying that we as the body, we submit ourselves to God. Remember, that's the first step. We submit ourselves to God and say, Father God, show us how to do this well so that we can protect our leaders. Okay? So we want to have a designated plan and procedure for planned rest times. Right? We know that rest is going to happen. We know that we need to foster and support the concept of rest. So we have a plan. We have a plan that includes rest, and maybe even it prioritizes rest above all of the other things. Do you have your rest days planned? Do you have your retreat days planned? Do you have your refueling and repair days built into your calendar? Put those in first, and then start putting in your projects and your appointments and those types of things. Right? So we want to make sure that we prioritize rest the way that God does. Before the time away, if we have and let me back up before I get there. If we say that a leader of some sort is going to take a sabbatical, if they're going to have a period of rest, maybe that's a day, maybe that's a week, maybe that's a year, they're going to take time away, do we think that that is evidence of failure? Do we think that that's evidence of weakness? Oh, yeah. Poor Pastor Bob, he's getting up in years and, he just can't minister the way he used to. So, I guess it's appropriate that, we let him take some time off because he's just not as good as he used to be. Is that the way that we approach it? Because if that's the way that we're approaching it, we're actually feeding into that concept of working and doing is more important than following God in his decree that we rest. Instead, our mindset should be, that's amazing. Pastor Bob is going to go and be rested, be recuperated. He is going to be rejuvenated by the Spirit of God. He's going to be healed, and he's going to come back stronger. What an amazing thing that we have the opportunity to fill in the gap while he is gone. We get to get practice doing things that we don't normally do, and more importantly, he gets to be healed and recuperated and made stronger so that when he comes back, then we're all better off. Right? Are we celebrating the concept of rest instead of only reluctantly engaging in rest? And certainly in our Western culture, we often look at rest as something we do reluctantly. And we have a difficulty. I'm going to go a little bit off the script. We have a little bit of difficulty sometimes just resting. We take time away from this type of stress and we replace it with a completely different but equally impactful type of stress, right? When I was in medical school, we called that work hard, play hard, right? So you drive yourself into the ground all week studying and doing all those things. And when you get those rare days off, well, you're going to drive yourself into the ground having fun because, work hard, play hard. And we lost sometimes that perspective on rest means withdraw from the stressor, right? So we celebrate the times when we're able to withdraw from the stress. We celebrate those times when we're able to protect our leaders or our people of influence so that they can withdraw from the stress, right? And so it's not just, okay, take you out of ministry, now go to a conference and be in school 10 hours a day for 3 days and call that a break. Like you just traded one kind of stress for another, right? That's not actually rest. It's good to have training. It's good to have instruction. It's good to have those things, those changes from your normal daily routine, but don't confuse those with rest. They're not the same thing. Okay? So before the time away, both the leadership and the team and the members need to know, what's the plan? What's the plan? Who's responsible? Who's going to fill that role? Who's going to do that part in the body while this part is away? We have a plan beforehand where we think it's so important to have rest, to have recovery, that we have built into our plan of ministry that we're going to protect our leaders in this specific way so that they are able to go separate themselves from the stressor, receive what they need to from God, and we're not going to fall apart. We're just going to agree that we're not going to fall apart while they're gone, okay? Because we have a plan. We have trained each other to work as a body. So there are parts of the body that need rest and protection at certain times. And sometimes all of us need it together. And guess what? We just stop. Whether it's in planting time or in harvest time, we stop because God told us to do that. Okay? And one thing that I learned, this is from my days in medical training, we call it the hot handoff. Okay? So let me tell you, when I was able to go on vacation, when I was in my intern year, okay, this is a terrible time of life where you have 30-hour shifts. Sleep is something you've heard about and you think you might remember, but you're not sure, okay? It's awful. I don't recommend it. But anyway, so we would have these things. We're in charge of the entire hospital. I have to care for all the patients in the hospital. I have to know what everything is going on with all the people. And then I leave, and somebody else has to take up the slack. They have to be in charge now. I'm going on vacation, or I'm going to just sleep. Maybe I'm going to sleep for 6 hours. That's amazing. But still, somebody else has to pick up where I left off. And some people would do it this way. Everyone's great. In bed 10, you ought to watch that one a little bit. Good night. And then they would leave, and that was it. Okay? And you're like, that doesn't help me. Now I have to go and see if I can engage with every single patient and get some picture of what's going on. I have to duplicate all of the work just so that I can get caught up and feel like I know what's going on, let alone actually care for the people, right? And so they trained us to be clear and complete in the information that you're handing off to the next person. And you want them to be as nearly as comfortable as you are with understanding what the issues are. So we would set aside a specific time where we would meet and we would go through the list of patients and say, okay, this is what's going on with this person. This is why they're here. They're on day 3. We expect that they could probably go home in the morning, but that is pending these tests that we need to get back. But I don't think that they're going to need anything specific between now and that time. So they should be okay. Now let's talk about the next person. This person is a lot more delicate, and we need to watch more closely, and we're watching how they respond to the medication. So we've been checking in every 2 hours and making sure that we know what's going on. And so watch very closely, blah, blah, and whatever. And so you give as much information as you can because you're planning to leave well, so that when you leave, the whole hospital doesn't fall apart. But also, when it's your time to be in charge of the hospital, you're hoping that your colleagues will do the same thing for you, so that we don't have gaps in our ministry, right? So things don't fall through the cracks, because we have a team approach, and everybody's working together. Everybody's working together in the team, and our whole goal is to work together for the same mission. So we work together on purpose to have a plan that includes and maybe even prioritizes rest. And then all those pieces that we put together are making sure that we all are communicating, we all have the same expectations, and we know, who do I call when this guy's not here? How does the work get done? What is the work that needs to get done? The worst was when there's, a secret thing that was very important, but only one person knew that that was important. And if that person wasn't there, it just didn't happen. And sometimes that caused a cascade of issues. And we're like, oh man, if we just knew that we needed to watch out for this one thing, we would have been okay. And everyone would have been cared for. So you see the point that we're getting to here. Rest is extremely important. In fact, I would argue that rest is more important than the work itself. Because you can do all kinds of things during the day, but you only do one thing at night, right? And that's the thing that we repeat through our whole lives. And so there's lots of different things that we can do for the work, but rest really is extremely important because it keeps us all healthy. But to do that well, we have to have realistic schedules. We have to schedule our rest. We have to engage with a team. And that's not just the leadership team, right? Because remember, the goal of the leadership team is to equip the members for the work of the ministry. So we're all in this together. The entire body is in this together. And so we look at this local gathering level and we say, okay, is everyone here clear on the plan? The plan is that we support each other with rest. And we do this really well in some places, and we do it kind of poorly in others. The place that we do it really well with, I don't know about your gatherings, but most of the gatherings I've ever been a part of, they have the meal train. Have you heard of the meal train? If you don't have the meal train, your gathering needs a meal train, okay? This is where people in the church get together and say, hey, you've had a big event in your life. We're going to offload some of the responsibilities on you. We're going to take care of you by providing food. What an amazing, wonderful thing, right? And we do that really well. We recognize this is someone who needs extra support. We're going to allow them to rest and withdraw from the stresses of just feeding their family. We're going to allow them to withdraw from that stress by providing for them. What a beautiful thing. Well, we can take that model and we can multiply that across every part of the church and every part of ministry. Like, hey, there needs to be a place, there needs to be a system in place where we can recognize the need for rest, recovery, and recuperation. It's not a failure. It's not because you're weak. Again, we're talking about the elite athletes. You're resting because you are strong. You're resting because you're attempting to become stronger. You're not resting because you're weak. You're not resting because you're broken. You're resting because you recognize the value of rest to achieve the goal that you're trying to get to. And then that's just magnified when there's an issue of injury or illness. We recognize, hey, there's a goal that we have that we all share, that we're trying to get to. In order to do that well, we have to magnify and really plan for the importance of rest. So we want to set up our system from top to bottom, all the way through, where we're prioritizing rest as both a preventative and also as a treatment for everyone in the entire body of Christ. And remember, we look at that pattern that repeats itself. Individuals need rest. Families need rest. Local gatherings need rest. Right? There might be a time when a local gathering needs to rely on the wider church body so that local gathering can provide rest, not just a single person, but maybe the entire gathering needs to rest and recuperate. So we look at this repeating pattern on multiple levels. So as we do every time, at the end of our instruction, you have two things that I want you to do, okay? So in order to do those things, you need to get out your note-taking device. Whether that's pen and paper, that's your smartphone, that's your tablet, you're just really, really good at remembering, I don't recommend that one. Get something that you can write on or record in some way. Maybe you've got an old-fashioned typewriter, or you've got a transcriptionist you can just speak to and she can type it for you. Whatever is your note-taking situation, make sure that you have that ready. And we're going to do two things, okay? We're going to ask God, of these things that I have learned today, and anything else, but specifically the things I've learned today, what is it that you want me to know? What do you want me to know? And we're just going to take time and we're going to listen to God. We're going to listen, what, Father, is it that you want me to know about this? Maybe it's something that I have said God wants to highlight to you. Maybe it's something I couldn't even think of, but God says, hey, I want you to know this today. Father, what do you want me to know? And you keep writing, keep recording, whatever he tells you, and you say, what else, until he said, you're good, that's all. Okay? And then when that's done, we're going to go to the second piece, which is, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with this information, this understanding? And he might tell you, I want you to go to Pastor Bob and tell him that it's important to rest. Or I want you to go and create a system where rest is encouraged. I want you to engage at your local body so that prevention of problems is something that you're focused on. Or he might say, I don't want you to do anything right now. I just want you to know this. Okay, that's between you and him. I don't have to be in charge of that. But we're just going to take a few minutes to listen and record. God, what do you want me to know? And then, God, what do you want me to do? And then at the end, when you have that, here's the homework. The homework part is, go do that thing. Okay? Whatever God has told you to do, we're going to implement it. We're going to actually put these things into practice. Okay? So take the time right now to listen. God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do?